Hello everyone, my name is Stacia Slowey, and I decided to do my literature review on the comparison of travel data collection methods. So to start us off, I wanted to give you guys a brief overview of the different travel surveys that are done around the country. They're done around at the national level, the state level, and regional level. This is just a few examples shown on the screen. You're probably most familiar with the National Household Travel Survey. So the goals and objectives of travel surveys include understanding and quantifying the characteristics and trends of individuals and households' travel habits, examining the relationships between travel and demographics. They serve as the basis for the future travel demand models, and then they inform regional and statewide transportation plans. As technology has progressed, so has the way that we collect travel data. So we started with conventional methods, and we still, to this day, use a lot of the conventional travel data collection methods, but then it evolved to using web-assisted methods, and then now more and more we use GPS-assisted methods. As far as conventional methods go, you can have face-to-face interviews, paper-based surveys, and then telephone surveys. A lot of the collection methods have the same limitations, and the three are listed here. The three main ones are listed here. So low accuracy. These methods really rely on people's memories, and so then they usually have issues with people underreporting their trips because some people may not think a certain trip is of importance, so maybe they don't report it, or maybe they just don't even remember that trip at the end of the day, and so then they don't report it then. This could be like a quick trip to the supermarket, or I had to go drop off the kids at a friend's house, that they just don't report at the end of the day. The next one is high respondent burden. These surveys take a lot of time and effort in order to track and record their movements throughout the day. And so that's just one thing that can cause respondents to not participate in surveys because it takes too much time. The next thing is a low response rate of certain demographics. They found with different studies that these conventional methods don't do a very good job at including, they underrepresent certain age groups. And so, for example, ages under 25, sometimes they don't even have landlines, so they can't participate in the telephone surveys, and they don't respond to anything in the mail, maybe. And so they found that a lot of these age groups under 25 just are not underrepresented in their samples. And then age groups greater than 65 are overrepresented. I just wanted to show you a quick overview of what a travel diary would look like. So conventional methods, they use these travel diaries for people to log their daily trips, and then they submit those either by mail, by telephone, maybe by a website. But basically it includes, a start-end time, a start place, an end place, what their mode was, who traveled with them, a description of what they were doing, what's their trip purpose, stuff like that. So the one on the left is from Utah, and then the one on the right is from a California travel survey. So face-to-face interviews, they gained popularity in the 1950s. The interviewer would basically go to a person's residence and survey them about their family's trips throughout the day, and then record those responses. So some people could see it as being risky for the interviewer, who had to enter different kinds of neighborhoods that might have, with some of them being having high crime rates. It relies on the memory of the survey respondent, like I was talking about before. And then but this one, what's kind of different about it is back when face-to-face interviews were popular, they did have high response rates, and maybe wouldn't have a high response rate today. Okay, so paper-based surveys, they were popular in the 1960s. It was basically a survey questionnaire, and they still use these today, a survey questionnaire that gets distributed by mail. It's more cost-effective than face-to-face interviews, but it requires a lot of effort on the respondent to be able to have to track their movements throughout the day using one of those travel diaries that I had just shown you. It has a lower response rate, and it relies on people's memories. Telephone surveys gained popularity at the same time as paper-based surveys. It was beneficial to actually use the two in unison, the telephone and the paper-based. So you basically get a paper-based survey mailed out to you, a questionnaire, and then somebody would follow up with you via telephone, which increased the response rate of these surveys. Even this combined method is still less costly than a face-to-face interview. Although it's getting more and more difficult to perform these travel surveys by telephone just because of the low response rates. And let's face it, a lot of people don't even have landlines anymore. And so it increases the potential for sampling biases just because of the smaller number of people that have landlines. Computer-assisted surveys, so these got deployed in the 1980s. They were employed just because they're less costly than the other three conventional methods. Participants would record their trips similarly to a conventional survey. So they'd record their trips on paper, travel diary, and then submit those trip details into a website-based platform. Again, this has the same downfalls as the other conventional surveys, so it relies on people's memory, still requires a high level of effort. But what's different about these computer-assisted surveys is it reaches a younger demographic that might not be able to be reached because they don't have a landline, or they don't respond to paper mail. And so there was a study done where basically they were able to use a web-assisted survey that was able to reach a age group of the 20 to 24 age group, and that's what's being shown in this graph on the right. Is basically once they were able to reach those respondents using a computer-assisted survey, they were actually able to track and find that the age groups of 20 to 24 actually had a much higher trip rate than what was being included if you were to do just a normal telephone survey. So the next thing I want to talk about is the GPS-assisted surveys. So these became popular in the 1990s. Way less respondent burden because they collect a lot of those trip details for you, but you still have to report, the trip mode, trip purpose, stuff like that, unless an algorithm generates that information for you. It was able to find, so for example, this has been consistent across a lot of surveys that have used GPS in conjunction with other survey methods, such as telephone. They basically found that in this 2009 Ohio Household Travel Survey, that traditional travel survey methods were underreporting trips by 30% when compared to GPS survey methods. And that's a lot of trips to be missing out in your traffic demand models. So GPS data costs are kind of expensive because you have to purchase the device, mail them out, and then you also have to process the data. So it takes a lot of labor on the back end to process that data. So this could severely limit the sample size and length of a survey, or be cost prohibitive altogether for a smaller MPO that maybe can't afford the purchasing of these GPS devices. So other major limitations of the GPS devices include the cold starts, warm starts, urban canyons. These all lead to erroneous and missing travel information. So basically, a cold start is when the device is just waking up at the start of the day. A warm start is when it's going from a sleep mode to active mode. And then an urban canyon might be in an urban environment where you have tall buildings that basically interfere with the signal of a GPS. So you'd have that missing data. So it's really important to have a secondary sensor on those GPSs, such as an accelerometer, where you can still track the speed and basically combine that data so that you know that the trip didn't just end at that point. So a subset of GPS-assisted surveys include these smartphone-assisted surveys. And basically, it's an application that runs on the respondent's cell phone. It's important to strike a balance between getting accurate spatial data and then not draining the cell phone battery as well. The more data, the more frequent you collect that data, the more it's going to drain that person's cell phone battery. There's several applications that have been tested by different agencies, and it asks for a varying amount of information from the participant. It can be fully passive or it can be semi-passive. And then this graphic I want to talk about just a little bit in the top right corner of my slide. This is basically the workflow of how the data gets collected. Your cell phone collects, your location using Wi-Fi, GPS, accelerometer. It uses that and stores the data onto the server database where the data gets processed, sent back over to your app so that you can validate your trips. And then it gets sent, and then you validate it, and then it gets sent back to the server database so that it can be recorded. I'm sure there's hundreds of different applications that people are developing, but these are just 3 of the ones that I wanted to list. The advanced travel logging applications for smartphones, also known as Atlas 2, and then Data Mobile, and then RMove, which was actually a study that's done within the region of the Triangle region of North Carolina. And then on the right side of my screen, I just want to show you real quick. This is an application that was developed, and basically just so you could see what happens at the end of the day where you need to validate your trips. This will pop up and show you your start end times, the different trips that you made throughout the day, and what mode, and the activity and stuff like that, so that you get to visually be able to see what happens at the end of the day. And so it's really easy for you to just be able to go through and validate those trips. And then it makes the data that much more accurate, because sometimes these trips get recorded and they're erroneous. So this is a really, really brief snapshot of the different travel data collection methods. I'm sorry for talking so fast, but hopefully it gave you a good overview. Just to recap on the stuff we talked about, conventional surveys, they're still widely used throughout the United States and beyond, but they are losing favor just because of those different issues that I was talking about with the underreporting, not being representative of the different demographics, and a large amount of survey respondent burden. Online travel surveys, they're less expensive than conventional methods, and they can reach different audience demographics that can't be reached maybe by landline telephone. They have similar shortcomings as the conventional methods, just due to the relying on survey respondents' memories. GPS-assisted surveys, it alleviates the burden on survey respondents. It can be cost prohibitive for some small and medium-sized MPOs at the full-scale level, and that's why it really hasn't been used at the full-scale level at different locations. GPS data costs, and then smartphone applications, they are on the rise, and I can see that that's going to be the way of the future of how we collect travel data from now on. It's not quite ready. There needs to be a little bit more development on the app side of things, and then there also needs to be just some more research done to just kind of perfect how the data gets post-processed. So that's it for me. Thanks, guys.